Hey guys, tonight we're talking about what happens when the thing that defines you gets taken away. Not in a movie, not in a feel-good story, in real life, where it doesn't resolve cleanly. We're talking about a musician who went deaf, not partially, completely. And what he did about it tells you something uncomfortable about human nature. Before we start, like and subscribe if you want, only if you actually want to. Comment if you've ever lost something you
What
thought
have
you
you
couldn't
done
live
to
without.
it?
It's part of the
Then
protocol.
lived anyway.
This
Get
is too
comfortable.
far.
We'll
It's
be here
necessary.
about an hour. That's fine. Bonn, Germany, winter 1778. 2 in the morning, the apartment is cold. The kind of cold that settles into walls and stays there. 3 rooms above a bakery on the Rheingasse where the smell of yesterday's bread mixes with dampness and something harder to name. Desperation, maybe. Or just poverty dressed up as ambition. In the back room, a boy sits at a piano, 8 years old. Small for his age. Hands too small for the keys, really, but that doesn't matter to the man standing behind him. The boy's fingers are bleeding. Not dramatically, just small cuts along the cuticles where the skin has split from hours of practice without rest. The blood smears onto the ivory keys, making them sticky. The man behind him is his father, Johann van Beethoven. 40 years old, though he looks older. Thinning hair pulled back, face red from drink and anger, often both. He was a tenor in the court chapel once. Decent voice. Not great. Certainly not great enough to escape what he was, which was a minor musician in a minor court in a minor German city. And he knows it. That knowledge sits in him like poison. Johann doesn't hit the boy. Not right now. He just stands there, breathing through his mouth, smelling of wine. Waiting. The boy plays the same passage again. Clementi Sonata, supposedly easy. The notes come out wrong. Not all of them, just enough. A rhythm slightly off. A fingering that hesitates. Johann's hand comes down on the boy's shoulder. Not a slap. A grip. Fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. Again. The boy plays again. The cut on his index finger opens wider. A drop of blood falls onto middle C. He doesn't stop. Stopping is worse. He's learned that much already. This is Ludwig van Beethoven. This is where it starts. Not with genius, not with inspiration. With a father who sees his son as the thing that will finally make him matter. Who looks at this 8-year-old child and sees only one thing: a second chance. Mozart had composed at 5. Everyone knew that. Johann knew that. He'd heard the stories, read the pamphlets. A child prodigy touring Europe, making fortunes, amazing emperors and kings. That could be his son, would be his son. Had to be his son. Because if it wasn't, then Johann van Beethoven would die exactly as he'd lived. Forgotten. So Ludwig practiced. 4 hours a day at minimum, often 6, sometimes 8 when Johann was drunk enough to lose track of time, but sober enough to enforce discipline. The neighbors complained, the landlord threatened eviction. Johann ignored them all. The boy would be great, had to be great. The mathematics of desperation allowed for no other outcome. In the next room, Ludwig's mother lay in bed. Maria Magdalena van Beethoven, 32 years old, dying slowly of tuberculosis, though no one said that word out loud yet. She could hear the piano through the thin walls, hear her son playing the same passages over and over, hear her husband's voice when Ludwig made mistakes. She didn't intervene. Couldn't really. Not anymore. She'd tried in the beginning. That had only made Johann worse. So she lay there and listened and coughed blood into rags she hid under the mattress, because Johann couldn't afford a doctor and wouldn't admit they needed one anyway. This is not how genius is supposed to begin. The stories we tell ourselves about talent don't include scenes like this. They start with a child touching a piano and producing beautiful sounds naturally, as if music flows through them like water. Divine gift, innate ability, born for this. But that's not what's happening in this room. What's happening here is breaking. A human being 8 years old being systematically broken down and rebuilt into something that can perform on command. It works. In the worst way possible, it works. By the time Ludwig is 9, he can play pieces that should be beyond him. By 10, he's performing for Bonn aristocracy at private gatherings. By 12, he's the assistant organist at the court chapel, earning money to keep his family fed, because Johann drinks most of his salary. The talent is real. That's the uncomfortable part. Underneath the abuse, underneath the pressure, there actually is something extraordinary. Perfect pitch, the ability to memorize complex compositions after hearing them once. An ear for harmony that goes beyond training, beyond teaching. As if some part of his brain is wired differently, processes sound in ways other people can't. But genius doesn't arrive pure. It arrives wrapped in the circumstances that shape it. And Ludwig's circumstances are teaching him things that have nothing to do with music. that love is conditional, that worth is measured by performance, that mistakes are punished, that rest is weakness, that the world will take everything from you if you let it. He's learning to be hard, suspicious, quick to anger, slow to trust. These aren't personality flaws. They're survival mechanisms. When your childhood is a test, you're failing every day. You either develop armor or you break completely. Ludwig develops armor. By the time he's 13, he barely speaks to his father except when necessary. They communicate through the piano. Johann demands. Ludwig executes. The relationship has been reduced to this transaction. Music in exchange for the absence of violence. It's not love. It stopped being love years ago if it ever was. But it's functional. And in 1783, in a cold apartment in Bonn, functional is enough. His mother dies when he's 17, July 17th, 1787. Tuberculosis, officially. Exhaustion, really. She simply stops fighting. Ludwig is in Vienna when it happens, having traveled there to study with Mozart briefly. One meeting, maybe two. Mozart hears him play, says something polite about potential. Nothing more. He's busy with Don Giovanni. Doesn't have time for an awkward German teenager, talented or not. Ludwig gets the letter about his mother 3 days after she's buried. He reads it once, folds it, puts it in his pocket. Doesn't cry. Crying is weakness. He learned that at the piano bench when he was 8. He gets on a coach back to Bonn immediately. When he arrives, the apartment smells different, emptier. Johann has been drinking steadily since the funeral. The place is a wreck. Dishes piled in the basin, empty wine bottles on the floor. His younger brothers Caspar and Johann, 11 and 9, sitting at the table not eating because there's nothing to eat. Ludwig doesn't say anything. He goes to the piano, the only thing in the apartment that's clean, and he plays. Not practice, not for his father, just plays. He plays for 3 hours straight. His brothers fall asleep at the table. Johann passes out in his chair. Ludwig keeps playing. Because the piano is the only place where things make sense, where effort produces results, where the rules are clear, and if you follow them correctly, beauty emerges. When he finally stops, his hands are shaking. Not from exertion, from something else. The realization settling in that his mother is gone and his father is useless, and he's 17 years old and now responsible for keeping 2 children alive. He becomes the family breadwinner, gets a position as court musician, plays viola in the orchestra, teaches piano to children of wealthy families, takes whatever work comes. The money isn't much, but it's steady, more steady than anything Johann brings in, which is less and less as the alcohol takes over completely. This is what success looks like at 17. Not concert halls, not fame, just the ability to keep the rent paid and food on the table. Ludwig doesn't complain. Complaining achieves nothing. He works. He practices. He composes, though, most of it he throws away, dissatisfied. His teacher during these years is Christian Gottlob Neef, court organist, patient man, one of the few adults in Ludwig's life who treats him like a person rather than a project. Neef sees the talent, obviously. Everyone sees the talent, but he also sees the damage. The way Ludwig flinches at sudden sounds, the way he doesn't make eye contact, the way he apologizes for things that aren't mistakes. Neefe doesn't try to fix any of this. You can't fix a person like you fix a composition. But he gives Ludwig something else. Space, time, permission to be good enough rather than perfect. It's not much, but it's something. Under Neefe's guidance, Ludwig starts to develop his own voice. Not just technically, though his technique improves, but musically. He begins to understand that music can do more than entertain. It can express things that words can't. Anger, grief. The kind of interior landscape that has no other outlet. He writes a set of variations on a theme by Dressler. Publishes them when he's 12. They're competent, derivative, but they're his. A year later, he writes 3 piano sonatas. Better, more interesting. You can hear him thinking on the page, working through ideas, testing limits. But Bonn is too small. He knows this by the time he's 20. If he stays, he'll become exactly what his father became. A decent musician in a minor position in a town nobody visits. The idea fills him with something close to panic. He needs to leave. Has to leave. But he also has 2 brothers depending on him and a father who can barely dress himself. The decision is made for him in 1792. His father dies. Not dramatically, just stops waking up one morning. Liver failure, probably. The doctor doesn't bother with an autopsy. Johann van Beethoven is buried in a pauper's grave. Ludwig doesn't attend the funeral. He's already gone. 3 weeks earlier, Count Waldstein, one of the Bonn aristocrats who'd noticed Ludwig's talent, had provided money and a letter of introduction. The destination, Vienna. The contact, Joseph Haydn, the greatest living composer in Europe, willing to take on a student. Ludwig leaves Bonn on November 2nd, 1792. He's 21 years old. Everything he owns fits in 2 bags. His brothers stay with relatives. He promises to send money, doesn't promise to return. Everyone understands this is permanent. The trip takes 2 weeks. Cold weather, bad roads. The coach gets stuck twice in mud. Ludwig doesn't care. He sits with his face pressed to the window, watching Germany slide past, thinking about Vienna, about what waits there, about what he's going to do when he arrives. He's not naive. He knows Vienna is full of musicians, talented ones, better trained than him, with better connections, with better manners probably. He's a rough, awkward kid from the provinces. Heavy Bonn accent, no social skills, tendency to say exactly what he thinks, which is rarely what people want to hear. But he has 2 things they don't. He has nothing to lose because he's already lost it, and he has a kind of desperation that sharpens everything. Makes him work longer, practice harder, care more intensely about things that other people treat casually. The coach arrives in Vienna on a Tuesday morning, November 20th, 1792. The city is enormous, 10 times the size of Bonn. Buildings taller than anything Ludwig has seen. Streets crowded with people who move like they have places to be. The noise is overwhelming. Carriages, vendors, church bells, all of it mixing together into a wall of sound that should be chaos but somehow resolves into something almost musical. Ludwig stands in the street with his 2 bags looking around, and he feels it. Not hope exactly. Something harder. Determination. This is where it happens. This is where he stops being the traumatized son of a drunk and becomes whatever he's going to become. He finds a room in a boarding house on the Alsergrund. Cheap, small, one window looking out onto a courtyard where someone's always yelling. Doesn't matter. He doesn't plan to spend much time there anyway. His first meeting with Haydn is awkward. The old master is polite, distantly interested. He accepts Ludwig as a student because Waldstein asked, and you don't refuse a count. But there's no warmth in it. Haydn is 60 years old. He's written over 100 symphonies, taught dozens of students. He's seen talent before. This rough German kid doesn't impress him yet. The lessons are formal. Haydn assigns exercises in counterpoint and harmony. Ludwig completes them, correctly mostly. But he chafes at the structure, wants to move faster, try things that aren't in the textbooks. Haydn doesn't appreciate this. He believes in foundations, in mastering the rules before you break them. They clash. Not loudly. Haydn is too professional for that. But there's tension. Ludwig feels it. The sense that his teacher doesn't really see him, doesn't understand what he's trying to do. It's frustrating, infuriating even, but also familiar. Everyone in authority has been disappointing him since he was 8. Why should Haydn be different? So Ludwig studies with Haydn during the day and ignores him at night. He finds other teachers on the side. Johann Schenk for composition, Johann Albrechtsberger for counterpoint, Antonio Salieri for Italian vocal composition. He's hungry for knowledge, for technique, for anything that will make him better. But what really teaches him is Vienna itself. The city is music. Everywhere you go, someone's performing. Street musicians, church choirs, theater orchestras, private concerts in aristocratic homes. It's constant, overwhelming, perfect. Ludwig goes to everything, concerts, operas, church services. He sits in the back absorbing, studying, not just the music but the performers, how they move, how they engage the audience, what works, what doesn't. He notices something. Most of them are playing it safe. Beautiful music, certainly, technically perfect, but safe, predictable. They're giving the audience what it expects, nothing more. Ludwig decides he's not going to do that. He doesn't know exactly what he's going to do instead, not yet, but he knows it won't be safe. His first public performance in Vienna comes in 1795, a private concert at the home of Prince Lichnowsky, one of the city's major musical patrons. The room is full of Vienna's musical elite, composers, performers, critics, all of them there to evaluate this new arrival from Bonn. Ludwig sits at the piano, doesn't smile, doesn't bow, just sits. The room goes quiet. He plays his piano concerto number 2. It's aggressive from the first note. Not in volume exactly, though there's plenty of that. In intent. The music doesn't ask for your attention, it demands it. The dynamics are extreme. Soft passages so quiet you have to lean in, then sudden explosions that make people jump. Some in the audience are shocked. This isn't how you're supposed to play. Too rough, too intense, too personal. Others sit forward. This is exactly what they've been waiting for. Something new, something that feels dangerous. When it's over, the applause is confused, enthusiastic from some corners, polite from others. A few people leave without speaking to him, but Prince Lechnowsky comes over immediately. You'll play here again, next month. It's not a question, it's a statement. Ludwig nods, doesn't say thank you. He's not grateful. He's proven something. That's different. Word spreads quickly in Vienna. There's a new pianist, German kid, plays like he's angry at the piano. Technically brilliant, but almost violent about it. Some people love it, others hate it. But everyone talks about it. Ludwig starts getting invitations, more private concerts, salons, gatherings. He goes to most of them, not for the social aspect, which he finds exhausting, but because each one is a chance to play, to test ideas, to see what works. He develops a reputation. Not all of it good. He's rude, doesn't engage in small talk. If someone asks a stupid question about music, he tells them it's stupid. If a host requests a particular piece, he might play it, or he might play something completely different. Depends on his mood. The aristocrats don't know what to make of this. Most musicians are deferential, grateful for patronage. Ludwig treats them like equals, sometimes like inferiors. It should be professional suicide. Somehow it's not, because the music is too good to ignore. He's also developing as a composer, not just performing other people's work anymore. Writing his own, piano sonatas, string trios, early symphonic sketches. The style is still forming. You can hear influences. Haydn, Mozart, Bach, always Bach. But there's something else emerging. A voice that doesn't quite sound like anyone else. His Piano Sonata No. 8, the Pathétique, written in 1798, is where you can really hear it. The opening is doom itself, low rumbling chords that sound like thunder. Then it breaks into this desperate running passage, fast, unstable, like someone running from something they can't escape. People don't know what to make of it. This isn't drawing room music. This isn't background for conversation. This is music that grabs you by the throat and forces you to pay attention. Some critics hate it. Too emotional, too uncontrolled. Where's the elegance? Where's the balance? But others hear what he's doing. He's not writing music to please anyone. He's writing music to express something. Interior states, psychological landscapes, things that exist but have no other outlet. This is new, radical even. Music has always been about beauty, about form, about entertaining the wealthy. Ludwig is trying to make it about truth, about saying things that can't be said any other way. It's working. By the time he's 28, he's one of the most talked about musicians in Vienna. Not the most successful, not the wealthiest, but the most interesting. The one everyone has an opinion about. He lives in a series of apartments, moving frequently. Landlords complain about the noise, the hours he keeps, the general chaos of his living situation. He doesn't care. The apartments are just places to sleep. His real life happens at the piano. He's not happy exactly. Happiness isn't really part of his vocabulary, but he's driven, focused. Everything is moving in the right direction. His reputation is growing. His compositions are getting better. Doors are opening. And then in 1798, he notices something. It starts small, a ringing in his ears. Persistent, not loud but constant, like a high note being held in the distance. He ignores it. Probably nothing. Stress. Too much work. It'll pass. It doesn't pass. Over the next few months, it gets worse. The ringing becomes louder. High frequencies start to disappear. Conversations in noisy rooms become difficult. He has to ask people to repeat themselves. At first, they think he's not paying attention. Then they realize he actually can't hear them. Ludwig starts to panic. Quietly, privately, but panic nonetheless, because he knows what this could be, what it probably is. And if he's right, then everything he's worked for, everything he's survived, everything he is about to be taken away. He sees doctors, several of them. They examine his ears, ask questions, prescribe treatments. None of it helps. One doctor suggests almond oil. Another recommends cold baths. A third thinks it's digestive, prescribes different diet. Ludwig tries everything. The ringing continues. The hearing continues to decline. By 1800, he can barely hear high notes on the piano. By 1801, conversations are nearly impossible unless he's facing the person directly in good light. By 1802, he's losing hearing and frequencies necessary for music. The thing that defines him, the only thing he's ever been good at. Going away, he withdraws, stops going to social gatherings, makes excuses. People think he's being rude again, antisocial. They don't know he's terrified of being exposed, of someone discovering that Ludwig van Beethoven, the brilliant pianist, can't actually hear anymore. In October 1802, he leaves Vienna, goes to Heiligenstadt, a small village outside the city. He tells people he's going for his health, needs quiet, fresh air. That's partially true, but what he really needs is to be alone, to figure out what the hell he's going to do. He rents a small house, spends his days walking in the countryside. The village is quiet. Almost no noise except wind and birds. He can't hear the birds anymore. That realization hits him one morning. He's standing in a field watching birds in a tree, and he can see their beaks moving, but hears nothing. He goes back to the house and sits at the desk, stares at blank paper for an hour. Then he starts writing. It's a letter to his brothers, Caspar and Johann. He hasn't seen them in years. Sends money occasionally, but they're not close. Never were really. Still, he writes to them, because there's no one else. The letter is 10 pages long. He writes it over 3 days. It's not coherent, jumps around, but the core message is clear. He's going deaf, completely deaf. It's inevitable. The doctors can't stop it. And he's been thinking about whether life is worth living under these circumstances. He's considered suicide. Seriously, thought about the mechanics of it. Which method would be fastest, least painful, whether anyone would care, but he hasn't done it, can't do it. And the reason he can't is the thing that's killing him. Music, he writes, it was only my art that held me back. It seemed impossible to leave the world until I had brought forth all that I felt was within me. There it is, the core of it. He can't kill himself because he hasn't finished. There's music inside him that hasn't been written yet, and if he dies, it dies with him. That's unacceptable, so he won't die. He'll adapt, somehow. He doesn't know how yet, but he will, because the alternative is leaving the work undone. He folds the letter, seals it, puts it in a drawer, never sends it. His brothers won't read it until after he's dead 25 years later. But writing it changed something, clarified something. He's not going to quit, not going to surrender. The deafness will progress, and he'll find a way to work anyway. He has to, because the music isn't optional. It's the reason he's alive. He returns to Vienna in November 1802, 32 years old, hearing at maybe 20% in one ear, less in the other. He sits down at his piano, puts his hands on the keys, can barely hear the notes anymore, and he starts to compose. This is where part one ends. Not with triumph, not with resolution, with a decision. To continue anyway, to find a method, to refuse the logic that says a deaf musician is a contradiction in terms. Ludwig van Beethoven is about to discover that the thing he thought defined him, the thing he's losing, was never the thing that mattered most. What mattered was the interior landscape, the ideas, the structures, the thing in his head that hears music no one else can hear yet. He doesn't know this yet. Not in 1802. He just knows he's not done. The cage his father built is gone. He escaped that years ago. Now he's in a different cage, one built by biology, by the progressive failure of his auditory nerve. And he's about to spend the next 25 years proving that cages only work if you accept them. Vienna, 1803. January, Ludwig van Beethoven sits in his apartment on the Petersplatz 4th floor, 2 rooms that smell like old coffee and manuscript paper. He's 32 years old. His hearing is failing systematically, predictably, like a building collapsing in slow motion. He can still hear some things. Low frequencies mostly. Bass notes, thunder, his own voice if he shouts. Everything else is going or gone. He's been back from Heiligenstadt for 2 months. Hasn't told anyone what he decided there, that he's staying, that he's continuing. That death will have to wait until the work is finished. People wouldn't understand anyway. They see the deafness as tragedy. He's starting to see it as something else, not a gift. He's not delusional, but maybe not pure disaster either, because something is happening to his music. On the desk in front of him sits a manuscript, Symphony No. 3. He's been working on it for a year. It's already longer than any symphony written before. Twice the length of his first 2. 4 movements instead of the traditional 3. The first movement alone is longer than most complete symphonies. It shouldn't work. The structure is too big, too ambitious, too much. But it does work. He knows it does. He can hear it, not with his ears. Those are increasingly useless. But with something else, some interior mechanism that processes sound without needing the physical apparatus of hearing. This is what he's discovering. that music exists in multiple places simultaneously, in the air as vibration, on the page as notation, in the mind as concept. He's losing access to the first. But the other two are still available, maybe even clearer now that the physical sound isn't interfering. He picks up the pen, makes a notation, changes a dynamic marking from forte to fortissimo, crosses it out, changes it to sforzando. No, that's not right either, back to fortissimo. But doubled in the brass, he's not hearing this, he's thinking it, imagining how it should sound, using memory, using logic, using some combination of training and intuition that doesn't require ears. The Third Symphony is dedicated to Napoleon Bonaparte. This makes sense to Ludwig. Napoleon is the embodiment of revolution, of destroying old systems and building new ones, of proving that a man can rise based on merit rather than birth. Ludwig has written Bonaparte at the top of the title page in his own hand. He finishes the day's work around midnight, sets the pen down, his hands are cramping. He's been writing for 14 hours straight, forgot to eat. Again. This happens more often now. Food seems less important than it used to be. Sleep too, there's too much to write. Too much that needs to get out of his head and onto paper before it's lost. He stands up, walks to the window. Vienna at night, he can see lights in other windows. People awake like him, or maybe coming home from theaters from parties from normal lives where hearing works and music is something you enjoy rather than something that possesses you. He presses his palm against the glass, feels the cold. That still works. Touch, vibration, temperature. The physical world is still accessible through other senses. He'll have to rely on those more, is already relying on them. When he plays piano now, he can't hear the high notes at all, but he can feel the vibrations through the bench, can sense the resonance in his chest. It's not the same, it's not enough, but it's something. 3 months later, May 1803, news arrives from Paris. Napoleon has crowned himself emperor, not first consul anymore. Not the revolutionary leader, emperor, like the Habsburgs, like the Bourbon, like all the old systems he was supposed to be destroying. Ludwig hears this news, processes it, and goes to his desk, picks up the manuscript of the Third Symphony, the title page with Bonaparte written in his hand. He stares at it for a full minute. Then he picks up a pen and starts scratching out the name. Not crossing it out neatly, scratching, gouging. The pen tears through the paper. He's pressing so hard the nib bends. The word Bonaparte disappears under layers of violent black strokes. The paper rips. His student Ferdinand Ries is in the room, watching this. Later he'll write about how Beethoven shouted, "So he is no more than a common mortal. Now he will trample on all the rights of man and indulge only his ambition. He will exalt himself above all others and become a tyrant." The symphony gets a new title, Sinfonia Eroica, Heroic Symphony, not dedicated to Napoleon anymore. Dedicated to the memory of a great man, the great man who stopped existing the moment Napoleon put a crown on his own head. This tells you something about Ludwig, about what matters to him. Principles matter, ideas matter, the music matters. People are disappointing, people betray ideals, but the work doesn't betray anything if you don't let it. The Eroica premieres in April 1805. Private performance first at Prince Lobkowitz's palace. The orchestra is confused during rehearsals. The piece is too long, too complex, too strange. The first movement keeps building and building, and you think it's going to resolve, and it doesn't. It just builds more. Some musicians complain, "This isn't how symphonies work. Where's the balance? Where's the elegance?" Ludwig doesn't care. He sits through the premiere watching the audience. Can't hear most of it anymore. His hearing has degraded to maybe 15%, but he can feel the bass notes through the floor, can see the musicians playing, can read the faces of the listeners. Some are confused, some are bored, but a few are leaning forward, eyes wide. They're getting it. They're understanding what he's trying to do, that this isn't entertainment. This is architecture. This is philosophy. This is an argument about what music can be. The public premiere comes a year later. Reviews are mixed. Some critics call it brilliant. Others call it too long, too difficult, too self-indulgent. One review says the symphony loses itself in complete anarchy. Ludwig reads this and laughs. Anarchy, yes, exactly. That's the point. Because what he's figured out is this: the old rules were designed for a world where music served function. Background for dinners, entertainment for aristocrats, something pleasant that didn't demand too much attention. He's writing music that demands everything, that refuses to be background, that insists you engage with it or leave the room. And if you engage with it, it's going to take you somewhere uncomfortable, somewhere intense, somewhere that forces you to feel things you'd rather not feel. This is new. This is radical. And it's only possible because he's stopped caring about pleasing anyone. Deafness is teaching him that. When you can't hear the audience reaction, you stop writing for the audience. You write for the music itself, for the internal logic of the piece, for something beyond immediate approval. Over the next few years, his method evolves. By 1807, his hearing is down to 10%. Conversations are nearly impossible. He starts carrying notebooks, conversation books. They'll be called later. People write down what they want to say. He responds aloud or writes back. This changes social interaction completely, makes it slower, more deliberate, less casual. He hates it, but it's functional. Better than pretending he can hear when he can't, he's also figured out some technical adaptations. When he plays piano, he puts his ear directly on the soundboard. The vibrations transfer through bone conduction. He can't hear melody this way, can't hear harmony in any traditional sense, but he can feel rhythm, can sense bass notes, can confirm that sound is happening. He cuts the legs off his piano, puts it directly on the floor. When he plays now, the sound resonates through the floorboards, up through his feet, through the chair. It's not hearing, it's feeling. But it gives him information, confirms what he's imagining is actually being produced. People who visit find this disturbing. There's something unsettling about watching a man play piano with his head pressed against the wood, eyes closed, completely disconnected from normal musical experience. But it works. For him, it works. His compositions during this period are getting stranger, bigger, more intense. Symphony No. 5 starts with 4 notes, just 4. The most famous opening in musical history, though no one knows that yet. Da-da-da-dum. 3 short, 1 long, that's it. But what he does with those 4 notes is build an entire universe. They appear in every movement, transformed, inverted, augmented, diminished, but always recognizable. The whole symphony is an argument about fate, about struggle, about the progression from darkness to light. Critics don't know what to make of it. When it premieres in December 1808, alongside the 6th Symphony and the 4th Piano Concerto, and several other pieces all in one 4-hour concert, the audience is exhausted, confused. The theater is freezing. The orchestra is tired and makes mistakes. But something is happening. Even the people who don't like it can't stop talking about it. This music is doing something music hasn't done before. It's not describing emotions, it's creating them, forcing you to experience psychological states through pure sound. Symphony 5 doesn't tell you about struggle, it makes you struggle. The tension is almost unbearable at times, and then the final movement breaks into C major, and suddenly it's triumph. Not described, actual. You feel it in your chest. This is what deafness is teaching him. That music is not about the sounds, it's about the structures, the relationships between notes, the tension and release, the architecture of emotion. He's composing completely from memory and imagination now. By 1810, his hearing is down to 5%, maybe less. He can't hear the piano at all in any meaningful way. When he conducts, he can't hear the orchestra. Musicians watch him but follow the concertmaster because Ludwig's tempo is erratic. He's hearing something that isn't in the room. This should be tragic. Everyone thinks it's tragic, poor Beethoven going deaf. How horrible, how unfair. But Ludwig is writing the best music of his life. Symphony 6, the Pastoral, Symphony 7, Symphony 8, Piano Concerto, 5, the Emperor. Pieces that are more complex, more sophisticated, more emotionally direct than anything he wrote when he could hear normally. There's an argument happening in his mind. A question. Is the deafness destroying him or freeing him? Both, probably. That's the uncomfortable answer. It's taking away something essential, but it's also removing distractions. He doesn't hear the noise of the street anymore, doesn't hear the chatter of aristocrats at concerts, doesn't hear critics literally or figuratively. He hears only what's in his head, and what's in his head is more interesting than anything in the external world. His personal life during these years is a disaster. That's putting it mildly. He falls in love repeatedly, always with women who are either married, engaged, or otherwise unavailable. Josephine Brunswick, Therese Malfatti, Antonia Brentano. He writes passionate letters, makes awkward proposals, gets rejected or ignored. In July 1812, he writes a letter to someone he calls immortal beloved, 10 pages, 3 parts, written from templates. It's desperate, intense, romantic in a way that's both beautiful and slightly unhinged. My angel, my all, my very self. Only a few words today, and at that with pencil. Why such deep sorrow when necessity speaks? Can our love endure except through sacrifices? Can you change the fact that you are not wholly mine, I not wholly yours? He never sends this letter either. Keeps it with he in his papers. Scholars will debate for 200 years who the immortal beloved was. They'll never definitively figure it out. Ludwig kept that secret. What's clear is this: he wanted connection, wanted love, wanted someone to understand him. But he was also fundamentally alone in a way that made connection nearly impossible. The deafness isolated him physically. His personality isolated him emotionally, and his work consumed everything else. In 1815, his brother Caspar Karl dies, leaves behind a wife Johanna and a son Karl. The boy is 6 years old. The will names Ludwig as co-guardian along with Johanna. This is a problem. Ludwig hates Johanna, thinks she's immoral, unfit. He goes to court immediately to get sole custody. The legal battle lasts 5 years. It's ugly. Ludwig calls Johanna the Queen of the Night after the villain in Mozart's Magic Flute, accuses her of various improprieties, hires lawyers, spends money he doesn't have. The case goes up and down through various courts. He finally wins in 1820, gets full custody of Karl. The boy moves in with him. Karl is 11 years old now. It's a disaster from the start. Karl doesn't want to live with his uncle. He wants to be with his mother. Ludwig doesn't understand this, can't understand it. He's saving the boy from a bad mother, giving him opportunities, education, a proper upbringing. But what he's actually doing is repeating his own childhood, projecting expectations onto a child who can't possibly meet them. Karl should be grateful, should be brilliant, should be perfect. Karl is none of these things. He's a normal kid, wants to play, wants friends, doesn't care about Latin or music theory or any of the things Ludwig thinks are important. Ludwig can't hear what Karl is saying, literally can't hear. By 1818, he's completely deaf. Totally. 100%. No sound gets through at all. The world is silent. When Karl talks, Ludwig can't hear him. They communicate through the conversation books. Karl writes, "I want to see mother." Ludwig responds aloud or writes, "Your mother is not appropriate influence." The gap between them is not just generational. It's fundamental. Ludwig is living in a world of pure idea, pure music, pure abstraction. Karl is living in reality, where he's 11 and misses his mother and doesn't understand why his uncle is keeping him prisoner. This will end badly, but that's for later. For now, 1818, Ludwig has full custody and is trying to be a father figure, despite having no model for what healthy fatherhood looks like. Meanwhile, the music continues, has to continue, because the music is the only place where things make sense. His deafness is complete, but his method has evolved to match it. He composes entirely in his head now, hears whole symphonies without a single external sound, works out every detail mentally before writing anything down. When he does write, he makes extensive sketches, pages and pages of ideas, fragments, themes tried different ways. He's not improvising anymore. Can't improvise. He's architecting, building structures, note by note, confirming each decision through logic and memory rather than sound. His sketchbooks from this period are chaos to look at. Crossed out passages, marginal notes, the same 4 bars written 20 different ways. He's obsessive, relentless. Every choice has to be right, has to serve the larger structure, because he can't rely on his ear to tell him if something works. He has to know it works through pure thought. This makes the music different, harder, more intellectual in some ways, but also more emotionally direct in others, because he's not moderating based on how things sound. He's writing exactly what he means, exactly what the structure demands. No compromise. The late piano sonatas start appearing. Number 28, 29, the Hammerklavier, number 30, number 31, number 32. These are strange pieces, difficult to play, difficult to listen to. They don't flow the way earlier sonatas did. They stop, start, jump to unexpected places. The emotions are extreme. Rage next to tenderness, next to something that might be joy or might be irony. It's hard to tell. Pianists don't know what to do with them. Too hard, too weird, too Beethoven. But a few understand, these pieces are not about the piano. They're about the mind, about consciousness, about the interior landscape of a human being completely cut off from external sound, but more engaged with music than ever. The Hammerklavier Sonata number 29 is the most extreme, written 1817 to 1818. It's massive, 45 minutes long. The fugue in the final movement is so complex it seems impossible. Multiple voices interweaving. Mathematical precision, but also emotional fury. Critics call it unplayable. Too difficult, too long, too much. Ludwig doesn't care. He's not writing for current pianists. He's writing for pianists who don't exist yet, who will have the technique and the understanding to execute what he's imagining. They'll play it in 50 years, he tells someone. He's wrong. It takes about 100. During these years, 1815 to 1820, Vienna is changing around him. The Congress of Vienna has redrawn Europe. Napoleon is defeated, exiled, dead by 1821. The old aristocratic order is being restored. The revolutionary energy of the early 1800s is being suppressed. Ludwig watches this, can't hear it obviously, but reads about it, sees it in the faces of people on the street. The excitement is gone, replaced by something more conservative, more controlled. He doesn't like this. The political repression bothers him. He's never been explicitly political in his music, but the spirit of his work is inherently revolutionary. It refuses authority, refuses tradition for tradition's sake, insists that new things are possible. In a Europe that's trying to pretend the revolution never happened, this is uncomfortable, dangerous even. But Ludwig is too established to suppress, too famous, too important. So the authorities leave him alone, let him be the eccentric deaf composer, the genius who lives in chaos and writes impossible music. The apartments he lives in reflect this chaos. Papers everywhere, manuscripts stacked on every surface, dirty dishes, dust. He doesn't notice, doesn't care. The physical world is increasingly irrelevant. Only the music matters. His health is deteriorating. Stomach problems, headaches, joint pain. He drinks too much wine, eats irregularly, sleeps badly, takes long walks in the countryside around Vienna, walking for hours working out musical problems in his head while physically exhausting himself. People who see him on these walks report that he's talking to himself, gesturing, conducting invisible orchestras. He's not crazy, he's working. Hearing music no one else can hear, working through problems that exist only in his imagination. By 1822, he's 51 years old, completely deaf for 4 years. His body is falling apart. His relationship with Karl is strained. His finances are uncertain. The Vienna musical scene is moving on to younger composers. Rossini is popular now, Rossini with his light operas and pretty melodies and easy accessibility. Ludwig finds this offensive. Not the success of Rossini personally, but what it represents. Music as entertainment again. Music as something pleasant and undemanding. Music that doesn't ask anything of you. He spent his entire adult life trying to make music that asks everything of you, that demands you engage, that refuses to be background. And now Vienna wants background music again. Wants to be comfortable. Wants to forget the revolutions and the wars and all the uncomfortable changes. Ludwig can't do that. Won't do that. Even if he wanted to, which he doesn't, he couldn't. Because the music in his head is getting bigger, more complex, more demanding. He's been carrying an idea for years. Decades, really. A setting of Schiller's Ode to Joy. He's made sketches, tried it different ways. Nothing felt right. Now in 1822, completely deaf, 51 years old, increasingly isolated, he finally knows how to do it. Not as a standalone piece, as part of a symphony. The final movement of a symphony. Voices and orchestra together, a symphony that culminates in a statement about human brotherhood, about joy as a choice rather than a circumstance, about the possibility of unity despite everything that divides us. It's ambitious, possibly impossible, certainly unprecedented. You don't put voices in symphonies. That's not how it works. Symphonies are instrumental, pure form, abstract. But Ludwig has spent the last 20 years proving that the old rules don't apply to him. Why start following them now? He begins work on Symphony No. 9 in 1822. It will take him 2 years. 2 years of complete deafness. 2 years of isolation. 2 years of working entirely from imagination and memory and logic. He writes the first 3 movements in the traditional instrumental form. But they're building to something. You can feel it. Each movement is searching, testing ideas, rejecting them. The scherzo is massive, driven, relentless. The adagio is tender but also distant, beautiful but cold. And then the final movement. It starts with case, dissonance, a harsh chord that seems to say, no, not this. Then fragments of the earlier movements appear, one by one, tested, rejected. No, not this either. Finally, a new theme emerges, simple, almost folk-like. The Ode to Joy melody, played first by cellos and basses, building, growing, adding more instruments, getting louder, more confident. And then for the first time in symphonic history, a voice enters, bass soloist, singing Schiller's words in German. O Freunde, nicht diese Töne, sondern lasst uns angenehmere anstimmen und freudenvollere. O friends, not these tones, let us instead strike up more pleasing and more joyful ones. The music that follows is part symphony, part cantata, part something that has no name because it's never been done before. Choir and soloists and orchestra all together, building this massive statement about joy, about brotherhood, about the possibility that humans can overcome their divisions and achieve unity. It's not naive. The music acknowledges the struggle. The earlier movements were dark, difficult. The journey to joy is not easy, but it's possible. That's the message. Despite everything, it's possible. Ludwig completes the Ninth Symphony in February 1824. He's 53 years old. Has been completely deaf for 6 years. Has not heard a single note of his own music in all that time. The premiere is scheduled for May 7th, 1824. At the Karntnertor Theater in Vienna, the anticipation is enormous. This is Beethoven's first symphony in 12 years. First major work in years. Everyone wants to know what the deaf composer has been working on. The rehearsals are difficult. The music is hard, really hard. The choral parts are extreme. The soprano line goes higher than most singers can comfortably reach. The orchestral parts require precision and power simultaneously. And Ludwig wants to conduct. He insists on it. Despite being completely deaf. Despite not having conducted in years. Despite everyone knowing this is a terrible idea. They compromise. Ludwig will stand on stage. But the actual conductor will be Michael Umlauf, the theater's Kapellmeister. Umlauf tells the musicians and singers privately, watch me, not Beethoven. Follow my tempo, not his. The night of the premiere arrives, May 7th, 1824. The theater is packed. 2,000 people, aristocrats, musicians, critics, regular Viennese citizens who've heard the rumors about this symphony, that it's strange, that it has singing in it, that it might be brilliant or might be a disaster, no one's sure. Ludwig stands on stage. Beethoven. 53 years old, gray hair wild, coat rumpled, face intense. But he can't hear them warming up. Can't. But he can't hear them warming up. Can't hear the random notes as musicians test their instruments. Umlauf raises his baton. Ludwig raises his arms. The symphony begins. What happens over the next 70 minutes will change music history. But Ludwig doesn't know that. Can't know it. He's conducting a symphony he cannot hear. Moving his arms. Beating time. But the time is wrong. He's hearing something in his head that doesn't match what's coming from the orchestra. The musicians watch Umlauf, follow his tempo, ignore Beethoven's gestures when they conflict. It works. The orchestra is together. The singers are together. The music is happening. But Ludwig is alone in silence, conducting something only he can hear. A version of the symphony that exists only in his imagination. The first movement ends. He doesn't notice. Keeps conducting for a few beats. Umlauf has to signal the orchestra to stay quiet. Wait. Ludwig finally lowers his arms. This happens again after the second movement and the third. Each time he doesn't realize the movement has ended until he sees the orchestra at rest. And then the final movement, the revolutionary one, the one with voices, the one that shouldn't work but does. The bass soloist stands, sings O Freunde, nicht diese Töne. Ludwig can't hear him, but he knows the words, has memorized every syllable, is conducting what he imagines, what he remembers, what he's hearing in some interior space that has nothing to do with ears. The choir enters, 200 voices, singing Schiller's Ode to Joy, building, growing, the orchestra swelling underneath, the sopranos hitting those impossibly high notes, the tenors and basses providing foundation, the whole mass of sound creating this statement about brotherhood, about chung, about human possibility. Ludwig conducts all of it without hearing a single note. The music builds to its final climax. Massive chords, full orchestra, full choir, every instrument, every voice, all together, creating something that sounds like affirmation, like triumph, like possibility made audible. And then it ends. Ludwig doesn't know it's ended. He's still conducting, arms raised, beating time to music that's only in his head. The orchestra is silent. The choir is silent. 2,000 people in the audience are on their feet, applauding, shouting, throwing hats, crying. Ludwig doesn't see this. His back is to the audience. He's still conducting, still hearing the music continue in his head. Caroline Unger, the contralto soloist, steps forward, takes Ludwig's sleeve, gently turns him around to face the audience. He sees it then. The standing ovation. The hands clapping, though he can't hear them. The faces emotional. People crying, hats in the air. The entire theater on its feet. He bows, not to the sound of applause. He can't hear applause. He bows to the sight of it, to the visual confirmation that something has happened, that the music in his head has successfully transferred to 2,000 other heads, that communication has occurred despite the silence. He bows 5 times, 6 times, the ovation continues. Police have to intervene eventually. Austrian law prohibits more than 3 curtain calls. Even for the emperor, only 3. Beethoven has exceeded 6, but no one cares, not tonight. Tonight, Vienna is witnessing something, not just a symphony, a statement, a demonstration, proof that the human mind can transcend its physical limitations, that silence is not the end of sound, that isolation is not the end of connection. Ludwig leaves the stage, goes backstage, sits down. Someone brings him wine. He drinks it. His hands are shaking, not from nervousness, from exhaustion, from 25 years of fighting his own biology, from 6 years of creating music he cannot hear. From this night, this performance, this moment of confirmation that it worked. The reviews the next day are confused, mixed. Some critics call it brilliant, revolutionary, the greatest symphony ever written. Others say it's too long, too difficult. The choral movement is bizarre, doesn't fit. The whole thing is excessive. Ludwig doesn't read reviews anymore. What matters is he's done it. The thing he set out to do back in Heiligenstadt in 1802 when he wrote that letter to his brothers about not being able to leave the world until he'd said everything inside him. He said it. The Ninth Symphony is the statement, the summation, the answer to everyone who thought deafness would silence him. It didn't silence him. It clarified him. It forced him deeper into the only place music really exists. Not in the air, not in the ear, in the mind, in the imagination, in the space between thought and expression where meaning takes shape. This is what Part 2 demonstrates. Not triumph over limitation. Transformation through it. The limitation became the point. The silence became the canvas. The isolation became the laboratory where he could experiment without interference. Would Beethoven have written the Ninth Symphony if he could hear? Maybe. Possibly. But not the same symphony. Not this symphony. This one required silence, required isolation, required the complete removal of external sound so the internal sound could become absolute. He's 53 years old, has been completely deaf for 6 years, has more work to do, more music to write. But this symphony this night, this moment of seeing 2,000 people on their feet for music he conducted but could not hear, this is the proof the cage has been escaped. Not the cage of childhood of his father's abuse. That was escapable through geography, through leaving Bonn, through becoming someone different. This cage, the cage of deafness, is escapable only through transformation, through becoming the kind of musician who doesn't need ears, who operates in a different realm, who has internalized the mechanics of sound so completely that the physical presence of sound becomes optional. He's done that. The Ninth Symphony proves it, and he's not finished yet. Vienna, 1824, the day after. Ludwig van Beethoven wakes up in his apartment on the Ungargasse, 53 years old, completely deaf, head pounding from too much wine and too little sleep. He sits up, papers scattered everywhere, dirty plates on the side table, the usual disorder. What matters is the conversation book on his bedside table. Someone has written in it. He picks it up, reads. The handwriting belongs to Anton Schindler, his assistant, or maybe just someone who tolerates him. The relationship is complicated. The message says, the premiere was a triumph. Everyone is talking about it. You should read the newspapers. Ludwig sets the book down, doesn't smile, doesn't feel triumphant, feels tired. The Ninth Symphony took 2 years to write, drained him completely, and now it's done, gone, out in the world. No longer his. That's always the strange part. You work on something in complete isolation, pour everything into it, and then you have to release it. Let other people have opinions about it. Most of those opinions will be wrong, or at least irrelevant, but that's how it works. He gets up, doesn't bother washing, walks to his desk, sits down. There's blank manuscript paper there. There's always blank manuscript paper. Because the work doesn't stop. One symphony finished means the next project begins. But today he just sits, stares at the blank page, thinks about what comes after you've written the thing you've been building toward for 20 years. The thing that was supposed to be the summation, the statement, the answer. What do you do the day after you've answered the question? You keep working. That's what you do because the work is never finished. Not really. There's always another idea, another structure to explore. Another thing that needs to be said. Over the next 3 years, 1824 to 1827, Ludwig writes his final works. They're strange, stranger than anything before. He's not trying to please anyone anymore. Was never really trying, but now he's actively not trying, writing for an audience that doesn't exist yet, maybe won't exist for 100 years. The late string quartets, 6 of them, written between 1824 and 1826, Opus 127, 130, 131, 132, 133, 135. Numbers that don't mean anything to most people, but to musicians, to people who understand what he's doing, these quartets are not music in the traditional sense. They're thought, pure thought expressed through sound. The structures are bizarre, a 7-movement quartet, a single movement that lasts 17 minutes, a fugue so complex it seems mathematically impossible. Emotional shifts that don't make sense unless you understand them as psychological states rather than musical moods. He's not writing about emotions. He's writing consciousness itself, the flow of thought, the way the mind moves from one state to another. Joy doesn't transition smoothly to sadness. It jumps, crashes, interrupts. That's what these quartets do. They interrupt themselves, contradict themselves, argue with themselves. Contemporary listeners don't know what to do with them. Quartets are supposed to be elegant, balanced. These are neither. They're difficult, demanding, sometimes actually uncomfortable to listen to. One reviewer writes, Beethoven has lost his mind. Ludwig reads this, laughs, not bitterly, actually laughs, because the reviewer is almost right. Not that he's lost his mind, but that his mind is all he has left. The external world has been reduced to visual information, touch, vibration. Everything else is interior. So yes, what you're hearing is his mind. Unfiltered, unmediated by physical sound. If you don't like it, that's fine. It wasn't written for you, it was written for the music itself, for the logic of the structures, for future listeners who will have the patience and the understanding and to engage with what he's actually doing. Meanwhile, his life is falling apart in all the normal ways. Carl, his nephew, is now 19 years old, living with Ludwig, hating every minute of it. The boy has tried to be what his uncle wants, tried to be studious, serious, interested in important things, but he's not. He's a normal young man who wants to drink with friends and chase women and not think about Schiller or Goethe or the categorical imperative. Ludwig doesn't understand this, can't understand it. How can Carl be ordinary when he has access to extraordinary things? How can he waste time on frivolities when there's knowledge to acquire, art to appreciate, meaning to pursue? The communication between them happens through the conversation books. Carl writes things like, I'm going out. I need money. You're controlling me. Ludwig responds aloud or in writing, you're ungrateful. You don't understand what I've sacrificed for you. You're throwing away opportunities. The gap between them is not bridgeable. Ludwig is trying to be the father he never had, but he's only capable of recreating the dynamic he experienced. Expectations, pressure, disappointment when those expectations aren't met. In August 1826, it comes to a crisis. Carl takes 2 pistols, goes to the ruins of Rauhenstein Castle outside Vienna, puts one gun to each side of his head, pulls both triggers. The guns misfire. One doesn't go off at all. The other fires, but the bullet only grazes his skull. He survives, is found hours later, bleeding, unconscious, but alive. When Ludwig finds out, he collapses, actually collapses, has to be helped to a chair, sits there for an hour staring at nothing. Someone writes in the conversation book, Carl tried to kill himself. He's alive. He's at the hospital. Ludwig reads this, processes it, and for the first time in 25 years, he questions everything. Not the music. The music is solid. The music makes sense. But everything else, his relationship with Carl, his attempt to be a guardian, his belief that he knew what was best. Carl survives. recovers, and makes it clear he doesn't want to live with Ludwig anymore. Wants to join the army, get away, start over somewhere his uncle can't control him. Ludwig agrees, has to agree. The alternative is watching Karl try again, and maybe succeed next time. So Karl leaves, joins the military, is stationed far from Vienna, writes occasionally, dutiful letters that say nothing real. Ludwig keeps them, reads them, knows they're empty, but they're all he has. This is 1826. Ludwig is 56 years old, completely deaf, increasingly ill, losing the only family connection he had left, and still working, because the work is the only thing that doesn't betray him. He finishes the last string quartet opus 135 in October 1826. The final movement includes a strange subtitle, Der schwergefasste Entschluss, the difficult decision. Above the music he writes, must es sein, must it be, and the answer, es must sein. It must be. People will debate for 200 years what this means. Is it about paying a debt? About death? About the nature of necessity itself? Ludwig knows what it means. It means the work continues because it must. There's no choice. The music inside doesn't stop just because life is hard, doesn't pause for grief or pain or isolation. It continues, it must continue. His health deteriorates rapidly after this. Liver disease, cirrhosis probably. From years of drinking, decades of it. The wine was never moderate, was sometimes the only thing he consumed all day. By December 1826, he's bedridden, jaundiced, stomach swollen with fluid. Doctors visit, perform treatments that are worse than useless. Bloodletting, draining the abdominal fluid through tubes. Medieval practices that do nothing except add pain to pain. He endures it. What choice does he have? But he's not optimistic, knows what's happening, has seen people die of liver failure before. It's not quick. It's not peaceful. He writes a letter to a friend, I shall hear in heaven. Maybe he believes it. Maybe it's just something to say. Either way, it acknowledges reality. The hearing isn't coming back. Not in this life. If there's another one, maybe there. If not, then the silence is permanent. By March 1827, he's actively dying. The doctors have given up pretending they can help. It's just a matter of time now. Days, maybe a week. Friends visit, write in the conversation books, say things that are supposed to be comforting. Ludwig reads them, doesn't respond much, is too weak, too tired. And also, what's the point? They're saying goodbye. He knows they're saying goodbye. Acknowledging it doesn't change anything. Anton Schindler is there most days, taking care of practical matters, making sure Ludwig has what he needs, which isn't much. Wine mostly, and paper. Always paper. Even now, dying, Ludwig keeps a stack of blank manuscript paper near the bed, just in case. On March 23rd, a package arrives. A case of wine, 46 bottles, a gift from a publisher, payment for some work. Ludwig sees it. Someone writes in the conversation book, the wine has arrived. Ludwig manages a smile. His last words, as far as anyone records them, pity, pity, too late. Too late for what? Too late to drink it. Too late to enjoy it. Too late to do all the things he meant to do but didn't. No one asks. He doesn't elaborate. March 26th, 1827, 5 in the afternoon. Vienna is being battered by a spring storm. Thunder, lightning, rain coming down in sheets. The room where Ludwig lies is dark. Several people are present. Schindler. Anselm Hüttenbrenner, a composer friend, a housekeeper, maybe one or two others. Ludwig is unconscious, has been for hours, breathing shallow, erratic. The end is close. Everyone can see it. At 5:15, there's a crack of thunder. Enormous, loud enough that the whole building shakes. Lightning illuminates the room. Bright, harsh, momentary. In that flash of light, witnesses will later report Ludwig's eyes opened. He raised his right arm, fist clenched, held it there for a moment, as if defying something. The heavens, death, fate, silence, all of it. Then the arm dropped, his eyes closed, he exhaled, stopped breathing. Ludwig van Beethoven, dead at 56, completely deaf for the last 9 years of his life, isolated, difficult, uncompromising, gone. The storm continued, the rain kept falling, thunder rolled across Vienna. But in that room there was finally silence. Real silence. Not the silence of deafness, the silence of absence. They prepared the body, dressed him in formal clothes, laid him out. The autopsy happened later, found extensive liver damage. Cirrhosis also found something else. Lead, high levels of it, in his organs, in his bones, likely from wine, which was often sweetened with lead compounds at the time. The lead probably contributed to the deafness, poisoned him slowly while he worked. The funeral was 3 days later, March 29th. 20,000 people attended. In a city of 250,000, that's nearly 10% of the population. Schools closed, businesses closed, Vienna stopped to bury its difficult genius. The procession stretched for blocks. 8 Kapellmeisters carried the coffin. 36 torchbearers walked alongside. The entire Vienna musical community was there. Composers, performers, publishers, students, people who'd known him, people who'd only heard his music. Franz Schubert was a torchbearer. He'd met Beethoven once briefly, had been too nervous to say much, but he'd studied the music, understood what Beethoven had done, what he'd opened up, the possibilities he'd created. Schubert would die 18 months later, only 31 years old. But before he died, he'd write some of the most beautiful music in the German tradition, music that wouldn't exist without Beethoven's example. That's the strange thing about influence. You can't measure it at the funeral, can't see it in the moment. The impact happens later, spreads outward, touches people who never met the person, never heard them speak, only encountered the work. Beethoven was buried at the Währing Cemetery, north of Vienna. The gravestone was simple, just his name and dates, no elaborate epitaph. Didn't need one. The music was the epitaph, but the story doesn't end with the burial, because the work survived, all of it, every symphony, every quartet, every sonata, every scrap of paper with musical notation on it. It all survived. His publishers kept printing the music. Orchestras kept performing it. Pianists kept struggling with the late sonatas. The Ninth Symphony became a standard, performed at major events, celebrations, commemorations, times when people needed to feel something large, something that acknowledged struggle but also insisted on possibility. The Ode to Joy melody became one of the most recognizable tunes in human history, used in commercials, political rallies, protests. The European Union adopted it as their anthem in 1972. No words, just the melody, universal, beyond language. This is what survives, not the man. The man was difficult, unpleasant in many ways, bad with money, bad with relationships, bad at basic human interaction. If you'd met him, you probably wouldn't have liked him. But the music transcended all of that, became something separate, something that belonged to everyone who heard it. And what the music said was this: limitation is not the end. Silence is not the end. Isolation is not the end. The human mind can create meaning even when external circumstances make that seem impossible. Beauty can emerge from struggle. Structure can emerge from chaos. Joy can exist not despite suffering, but because you've survived it. These are uncomfortable truths. They don't offer easy comfort, don't suggest everything will be fine, don't promise rescue or relief. They just acknowledge that the work continues, must continue, because stopping means admitting that the limitations won. And Beethoven spent 56 years, 9 of them in complete silence, proving that limitations don't win. They just changed the terms. 50 years after his death, 1877, they exhumed his body, moved it to a better cemetery, Vienna Central Cemetery, gave him a proper monument. During the exhumation, they examined the bones, confirmed what the autopsy had shown. Lead poisoning, extensive. The wine he drank to ease the pain had probably been the thing killing him all along. They also examined his skull, the ear bones, tried to understand the deafness, found damage, deterioration, but couldn't definitively say what caused it. Genetics maybe? The childhood abuse? The lead? Probably all of it. Accumulating, destroying the auditory nerve piece by piece. Didn't matter by then. He'd been dead 50 years. The music had been circulating for longer, had already influenced everyone who was going to be influenced. Brahms, Wagner, Mahler, all of them building on what Beethoven had started. All of them trying to write music that meant something beyond entertainment. The 20th century arrived. Recording technology developed. Suddenly, Beethoven's symphonies weren't limited to concert halls, could be heard anywhere, anytime. The Ninth Symphony was recorded dozens of times, hundreds, each conductor interpreting it differently, each finding something new in the structure. It was played at the fall of the Berlin Wall. November 1989, Leonard Bernstein conducting. Changed Freude Joy to Freiheit Freedom in the lyrics. The meaning shifted slightly, but the core remained. Brotherhood, unity, the possibility of overcoming division. It was played after September 11th, 2001, at memorial concerts across America. The music serving the same function it had served for nearly 200 years, acknowledging tragedy while insisting on hope, not naive hope, earned hope, the kind that comes from surviving. It plays every New Year's Eve in Japan, tradition, thousands of performances simultaneously across the country, the Ode to Joy sung in German by Japanese choirs. The cultural translation doesn't diminish it. If anything, it proves the universality. Music that works across languages, across centuries, across the vast differences in human experience. This is the legacy, not the man, not his difficult personality or his failed relationships or his inability to hear for the last third of his life. The legacy is the proof, the demonstration, that the human mind can create order from chaos, can find meaning in limitation, can transform suffering into something that helps other people survive their own suffering. Beethoven died alone, in pain, deaf, isolated. Having pushed away most people who tried to care about him, that's the biographical truth. Uncomfortable, not inspirational, but the music didn't die alone. The music connected, still connects. Will probably continue connecting for as long as humans have ears and instruments and the capacity to be moved by organized sound. 200 years later, music students still struggle with his piano sonatas, still work through the late quartets trying to understand what he was thinking, still perform the symphonies in concert halls that didn't exist when he wrote them, for audiences that include people he never could have imagined. The Ninth Symphony gets performed somewhere in the world almost every week. The Ode to Joy plays at weddings, graduations, funerals, political events, sporting events, anywhere people gather and need to feel something larger than themselves. And every time it plays, the same question emerges. The one Ludwig answered in 1826 in that final string quartet, must a sign, must it be? The answer is always the same. Sign. It must be. Not because the world is fair, not because suffering leads to reward, not because limitation is secretly a gift. Those are lies we tell ourselves to feel better. It must be because stopping is not an option, because the alternative to continuing is giving up. And giving up means the limitations win, means silence wins, means isolation wins. Beethoven refused to let them win, not through optimism, not through positive thinking, not through any of the comfortable narratives we use to make suffering palatable. He refused through work, through relentless, obsessive, exhausting work, through writing music he couldn't hear for people who didn't exist yet, through creating structures so complex they seemed impossible until someone finally figured out how to play them. That's the legacy, not triumph, not overcoming, not any of the easy narratives. The legacy is demonstration, proof that the thing you think defines you might not be the thing that actually defines you, that losing what you thought was essential might force you to find what's actually essential. For Ludwig, what was essential wasn't hearing, wasn't ears, wasn't the physical apparatus of sound. What was essential was the interior mechanism, the thing that organized sound into meaning, the architecture of music that existed in his mind before it existed in the air. He lost access to sound, never lost access to that. And in the space between those two things, in the gap between what he could no longer hear and what he could still imagine, he created some of the most powerful music humans have made. That's what survives. Not the tragedy, the work, the output, the proof that limitation is not the end, just a different beginning. Harder, more demanding, but possible. As must sign. It must be, not because it will be rewarded, not because it will be easy, not because anyone will understand while you're doing it. It must be because the alternative is silence. Real silence. The kind where nothing gets said, nothing gets made, nothing survives. Beethoven chose creation over silence. Every day for 56 years. 9 of those years in complete deafness. And what he created outlasted him by 2 centuries and counting. That's the story. That's what happened. Not inspirational in the comfortable sense. Not a lesson about positive thinking or overcoming obstacles or any of that. Just a demonstration that the human mind, even broken, even isolated, even operating under conditions that should make creation impossible, can still create, still organize chaos into meaning, still leave something behind that helps other people survive. He died in a storm, fist raised against the thunder, defiant to the last moment, and then gone. But the music stayed, still stays. Will probably stay long after everyone reading this is gone too. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all legacy ever is. Not immortality, not being remembered accurately, just leaving work behind that continues to function, to mean something, to help. Beethoven left that in silence, in isolation, in defiance of every reason to stop. Es muss sein. Make of it what you will.